Our guest this episode is Cesar Viana Teague, a go-to-market enablement and change management consultant who helps founders and executives drive real revenue growth with their mid-market teams across the US and Europe. Cesar equips leaders with the skills to build trust, guide change with clarity, and deliver presentations that truly engage. His approach blends proven frameworks with the practical coaching so teams don't just manage change, they thrive through it. So he's here to show and share how authentic leadership and clear communication create stronger engagement and measurable results. Please welcome to the podcast, Cesar Viana Teague. Cesar, welcome.
Welcome to the Engaging Personalities Podcast. I'm Anders Belanger, founder and CEO of Engagify, where we're on a mission to rehumanize business through engagement. We believe that we can all be more successful if we can command attention and deepen connection. So stick around to the end of the show and we'll reveal how you can be our next guest on a future episode. So let's get ready to engage.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So, I always typically start where we start. How did you get into this business? Like, what's your background that brought you to the place you are right now?
Yeah, sure. No, I think it's a good question. I've been really in sales and marketing all my career. I mean, I started selling American jeans in London while going to college there. And then I came to San Francisco to continue undergrad and graduate studies, and then Chicago for doctorate and leadership. And so, but I've just really been engaged in it, in this whole continuous improvement process. And really, enablement really kicked in around 2012. So just over 12 years ago or 13 years ago, I just really got into the enablement. The nomenclature enablement wasn't even around yet.
Right. I always think it's such a recent thing, and I didn't even know it went back that far because it just, but my awareness. But yeah, so
Yeah. I mean, that's
enablement.
around 2013, 2014,
Yeah.
the word sales enablement came about. And then recently, I think some folks have changed it to revenue enablement. So it's not just about the sales, it's about the revenues, because sales is the motion, the revenue is what the result is. So they kind of shifted to that piece. But whatever you want to call it, I've been really doing that for a bit, really, first as an individual contributor, of course, and then a sales manager, and then a regional sales director and trainer. So I've actually been training teams for 18 years. Especially around the Americas. So I got to travel a bit. That's a lot of fun to see different, go to visit some companies, tech firms mostly, in the Americas, and to work with teams on their presentations, especially selling skills and sales presentation skills on that. And then the change management piece came about 8 years ago, and we're incorporating it because I found that you can have different technologies you're introducing in your own company, or perhaps you're selling it to other companies and you're trying to get them to change. And there's a number of projects that have gotten derailed because the change management process wasn't really done correctly or thoroughly enough, in terms of getting people up to speed and on board with the change, because not very many people necessarily like change, right? So that's
Well,
that's
exactly.
really
Right.
that's a little bit of the background on how I got involved in that and what I've been doing.
Uh-huh.
And currently, I'm actually working with a Salesforce partner who does a lot, 20-year experience, has his own company and runs, um, really does various implementation work around the different clouds of Salesforce, in particular Health Cloud, for healthcare providers, medical practitioners, et cetera. And so, but even for ERP, which is arguably one of the most complex softwares that you can implement, the enterprise resource planning software touches many departments. And so you can imagine a lot of people are going to say, what? You mean I have to do this, including my day job? And so that's why they don't want to change what they're
Uh-huh.
doing. Maybe they don't really see the benefits, or they don't necessarily understand the outcomes because it hasn't been communicated. And so that's where the proper change
Yeah.
management comes in for go to
Well,
market.
it's fascinating that you've kind of bridged those two worlds in a way, because I think of change management and consultants being a thing, and sales enablement being something else over here. But if people are not going to embrace the change, how can they get value from the sale, right? Like it makes sense in a way that it's part of a more of a holistic approach
Right.
to all of that, right?
Right.
Um, yeah. So now let's just go back to the sales and enablement thing before we get right into the change management
Sure.
side of things. And when you see as a consultant too, you have this like be able to see the landscape, the perspective of being outside of the problem or seeing that problem exist in multiple corporations and different organizations. What are
Mhm.
you seeing out there as issues on this sales enablement, revenue enablement, sales acceleration, all the different words that they use for it?
Mhm.
What are you seeing out there, organization to organization, is kind of a repetitive error, challenge, issue?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's trying hard to make it work, right? And I think because of that, I think they tend a lot of people tend to be focused on the content, right? And by the way, we should define enablement, I think, to start with. And I define enablement as the three T's. So there's the training, the tools people are using, and then there's the transformational coaching that needs to happen. So that's kind of like the three things that I do in terms of the enablement, sales enablement part. And I think a lot of people are focused on the content of it. And so I think just like in marketing, I think a lot of sales enablement, they're trying to prove their value and ROI in terms of the results they're getting and how they measure them. And there's a number of other discussions which we could spend a whole hour just talking about that. Um, but as far as the content, I think a lot of folks are focusing on the content piece and on the training side. And while the training bit is important, I think what's even more important to get results is really the coaching piece to ensure the behavior change. Because we can check the box and we can deliver all kinds of trainings and all kinds of things, but we've probably seen and heard how much information is forgotten within 30 days. I think the stat is something like 80% of the information has been forgotten after 30 days, whatever the training is, not in just sales. And so what do we do in order to to help with that? And so that's why I'm saying I think the important part to focus on is that coaching on the behavior, on the gaps. And mind you, everybody has their own strengths and weaknesses. So we have to identify that as well. And typically the trainings are delivered to a group. And so it's a bit of a cookie cutter because you have to start there, but I wouldn't stop there. I would continue with, okay, now that we've delivered the training to the group, we need to identify the strengths and weaknesses of each individual participant and then do some coaching to close the gaps for each one in order to get the results and move them from a C player to a B player, a B player to an A player, what have you, in terms of the sales bit. So that's what I see as the most effective doing that. And at the same time, coaching the sales managers to help them hold the teams and folks account or managers in general, just hold their team members accountable, whether they're in sales or other departments, is probably the best bang for your buck. And I think that's the way to go in terms of where to focus on the enablement and coaching piece.
For sure. Yeah, lots to unpack there, Caesar. Like one of the things is, that content, like what you say, but then how you say it, how it's delivered and those people. So training them on that piece, but then making sure they're actually doing it and delivering, through the coaching side of things. And then the other piece too, where you're talking about, getting everyone on board. I mean, obviously leadership's bringing you in, so I hope they're they're on board. But equipping those managers and everything to lead their teams and stay consistent with that. Um, what can you tell us about authentic leadership in terms of engaging those teams and creating impact within the revenue department?
Sure. Well, authentic leadership, that's something that I did do some research on for 7 years at the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. And that's, I mean, God, the more you research, the more you realize how much you don't know. It's like, wow,
Right.
there's just so much. I was focusing on that intersection of cultural intelligence and authentic leadership, in particular with multicultural teams and so communicating rather with multicultural teams. So just focusing on the authentic piece for the moment, what does that mean? And
Mm,
that's usually what that means is that the person has an increased amount of self-awareness, And we've seen there's been books written about EQ, like emotional intelligence. There's books written about CQ, cultural intelligence. You need a bit of both, really, and that's where the self-awareness and understanding your own strengths, weaknesses, limitations, etc., motivations. And then there's also disc profiles and other, right?
Right.
And other types of assessments where one can determine all that. And that's usually the best place to start is by doing various assessments to see, okay, what really makes you tick and where are you in terms of this self-awareness piece? Where are you strong and what are the gaps that we need to close? Again, it's the same coaching approach. And then figuring out, okay, as part of being authentic, what does that really mean? Okay, I'm aware about these areas, but what do I need to do in order to be authentic or come across as authentic to others? And that's where, we're really showing a little bit more about what's called the relational transparency, which also includes some showing some vulnerability, where people feel and see and feel that you're human and you're not just sitting on some high chair somewhere, but they can feel that they can open up to you, and that's where that relational transparency comes in, where they feel you're an open person and you're pretty straightforward, right? And you don't have any necessarily any hidden agendas. And
Yeah.
that's really being authentic. Really, it sounds kind of easy to do, but it's not to be able to, be vulnerable, to have some empathy, to increase your relational transparency, and all these things. It's all part of that
Right.
self-awareness, but then how do you know? So you still have to get feedback. And that's where those three, maybe you've done that, or folks who join you here have done those 360-degree
You.
assessments,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
The view of getting feedback from, well, not just internal folks at different levels internally, from people who are, reporting to you, peers, and people you report to, but also potentially from vendors and customers and suppliers, right?
Yeah.
And see what they think. Then you get a really strong perspective, and that's going to help you to increase and build the trust that you're trying to communicate with folks, and certainly also this idea of being able to build more psychological safety, because that's one of the main things where they, especially internally, where employees feel safe to be themselves, express their opinions, and certainly take risks. A lot of companies talk about innovation as one of their top values. Well, that's fine, but in order to innovate, guess what? You got to take
Yeah.
risks and make mistakes. And so if the leadership is not open to that, and if they're giving people a hard time because they failed, then that's not an innovative culture.
Yeah.
It's more espoused than it is practiced.
Right. It reminds me a little bit of the Kaizen thing, out of Japan, where you've got that openness to suggestions, and that that the good ones will be actually used and implemented. Meanwhile, if you don't have that culture of, you know, wanting to have that improvement and knowing it'll be fixed, people won't bother taking the time or anything like that, right? But the other thing you said too, Caesar, was,
Mm,
that relational transparency, which is a little bit like, I don't know, am I getting this? If I'm getting this right, tell me. But like a relatability, is that just really what that is? Is just being able to have that connection with,
yes.
team members. And so there's that vulnerability that you said, and I guess just like holding space for people to be themselves,
Right.
uh, and that's part of that safety as well.
Including
Yes.
yourself. You
Yeah.
start with yourself. Yeah, as a leader, you got to start with yourself, sharing
Right.
your true self, having no hidden agendas, right? And then people say, "Oh, this guy's for real," and I can feel I can open up with the person, whether that's usually one on one or in front of others, which is a little bit more challenging in like a team meeting setting. But then that's why they also do these team building exercises. That's some of the purpose of it, is to really be able to understand who the folks are are. Yes, we want to be able to roll together in the same direction, but I want to know that the person to vote is someone I can trust and someone I can work with, right? So
Yeah.
that's also why they do those things in order to build that relationship.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I'm just, as you were saying that, it made me think of how we put our best foot forward, right? Is one way we put it. But like you go to an interview, and when you think about how kind of, I don't know, fake an interview is in some ways, right? We're trying to find that person in there, but you probably are putting the best light on you as possible because you want to get hired, but that's how we start off, and it's kind of like, I think sometimes with imposter syndrome and some of the things that we face and some of the anxieties people have, I think it really goes against, this authenticity at work. What are, you have thoughts on that? I'm sure you do, Cesar.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely as far as, how do you separate the um, authentic self from somebody that you're trying to be. And I think that comes back to what you mentioned about that imposter syndrome, where we all at times maybe may feel that. And that's normal. It's not a wrong, bad thing. So you're just, I think as humans, I think we're trying to evolve. And a lot of folks are trying to continuously improve, part of your Kaizen that you talked about. And so in order to do that, what do they say? Everything you want is outside of your comfort zone. And so it's like you're trying to push against that. And so it's not comfortable. And again, it's part of the change process. And so it's getting comfortable with the change, getting comfortable with something that isn't naturally that you've been doing, because it's like driving, all of a sudden, when you learn how to drive, when I first learned how to drive stick shift, it was like, oh, you mean I have to put my left foot on the clutch, right foot on the pedal, and then I have to shift gears here? You mean, and I got to drive too? Like, you
Yeah,
have to do
yeah,
all
yeah.
these things.
A lot
So
unconsciously, right? Yeah.
exactly is the conscious. So eventually, as you start practicing those different areas, I think then it becomes a little bit more, that unconscious competence piece where you're just doing it and flowing and it feels good and you're not sure why, but it's working. So,
Yeah.
but it takes a little time to get to that stage. But again, the whole change process, which we were touching on earlier,
Yeah.
it's usually not a comfortable thing for most people.
Right. Right. Yeah. Staying the same is so easy, right? And we don't want work to do or anything like that, right?
Comfort. Yeah, we're comfortable. We're set, and maybe as we get older, we're also more comfortable being comfortable.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? Speaking of comfort or lack thereof for some people, communicating in front of a group of people or presenting information can be quite uncomfortable.
Oh yeah.
Do you have like a model or a formula that you use for presentations that you teach so that people can engage and
Yeah.
communicate? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's different, and even part of the change management piece. Again, we were talking about that. In order to, a big part of the change piece is the communication, and certainly as a leader, you have to be able to communicate that. And so I use a model that's called the 5P formula. I actually came up with it in, wow, 14 years ago next month. And I've been using that in different scenarios. Predominantly, I use that with sales presentations for people who have to present. And there's a lot of folks who do, and certainly SMEs also present, subject matter experts, who are definitely not as comfortable because I noticed that subject matter experts tend to be a little bit more on the introverted side. And usually the sales folks are more on the extroverted side, so they have no problem. We got to figure out how to actually shut them up a little bit, or to less is more. It's a little harder. I think less is more is a little harder for folks in sales and marketing than those who are SMEs. But maybe that's a bit of a generalization, but it's an interesting thing I've noticed. And so the 5P formula really just helps to make it into a cohesive, or have a cohesive structure in order to make a bigger impact in a short period of time. The challenge also with a subject matter expert, by the way, is that they're an expert and they know a lot. And so they can very quickly overwhelm their audience in like 5 minutes.
Burst of knowledge, right? And then lose
Yeah.
people. Yeah.
You lose people, and then what happens when people are confused, or when it's just eyes start rolling, then you kind of lost them a bit. But it's not so much the respect for you because you're an expert. It's just the information just didn't land.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so the 5P formula really is just a structure to help. And it's just about, the 5Ps is just position yourself and your audience, position the problem, position the solution, position your proof, and position your call to action. So if you can do that, and you can do that in 60 seconds, or you can do it in 60 minutes. It just depends. It's like an accordion that you can adjust as needed depending on the length of your presentation and the type of presentation that it is. So I have different, models, but that's the main model that I use for the 5P formula piece. And I use that as well as part of the strategic messaging and strategic planning for the change management, the work that I do.
Oh, okay. So that kind of translates back and forth on presentations and the change management.
Right, because of the communication piece that needs to happen within change management. That's a bit of a separate conversation, but certainly one of the most important aspects of change management is that stakeholder engagement. And certainly not just for the stakeholders, but also for the rest of the employees or the employees at the client company, depending if it's an internal change or an external change of a company. And so you need to be able to communicate that. And so using some of these models helps with okay, how am I going to structure my communication? What am I going to say? And what's appropriate? What's the cadence as well as far as this communication? Do I over communicate? Do I under communicate on this? And so there's just different approaches to take on that, but the models help with just making sure that you do it. So,
Yeah, making sure you do it and you cover what you need to, right? In terms of the size or the message of the communication, it sounds like, right? With positioning.
absolutely.
Of all
The
those
positioning, yeah, it's very important. And also, I should mention that it's better to do it earlier than later. In other words, back to that, how does this tie in with authentic leadership? Is you want to show up and you want to involve a lot more people earlier in the conversation versus showing up as a transactional leader, which is not what an authentic leader is. It's kind of like an opposite. A transactional leader would just show up and say, okay, Anders and team, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go for this, this, and this, make it happen. That's one approach. That's more of a military kind of like top-down style. That's what I mean by transactional. Versus if you're involving more people earlier on and saying, you know what, I really, that's why I have my strategic planning model, which is another model where you're involving people earlier on in the conversation to get buy-in earlier than you think. That is the single most important thing of any change is you have to get the buy-in much earlier than you thought you did. It's not just about training people on this new technology. You got to get the buy-in and why are we doing this? What's the vision and mission around this? But then getting people involved in that vision and mission earlier. So then, you know what? Anders, you contributed to this, or you see that you've contributed, your voice is being heard, you're feeling respected, you're looking at the other folks who are involving you as authentic in terms of their leadership because they're being transparent. So it all ties in together. I hope this is making sense.
It does. And the thing that came up for me when you're saying that is it reminds me through our kids' journey through different schools. Now they're just both in high school this year. There's been times where they've kind of got shifted and redirected into different schools than we thought they were going into. And it's partly because of population and just numbers and everything coming through. But they would have these town halls where they wanted to listen, and they wanted to involve us in the process. The problem was it felt inauthentic, Cesar, because the way it was kind of, it was happening whether they listened to us or not, right? Like it was, the town hall seemed like it was almost the theater of it, as opposed to actually doing research, listening to what the community wants and what needs, taking that into consideration, and then making a recommendation. It was kind of like, this is happening. We're having a town hall. We'll want to hear your concerns. It's like, yeah, thanks. And we're just going to do it anyways, right? So that authentic leadership, I think, really on the macro side of things, in terms of the change, has to come through, and people be able to feel that and sense that, for them to get that buy-in properly, I think, right? And this is
to express their real opinion, to express their authentic opinions, they have to feel that, hey, this is an authentic mission and vision. I want to be a part of this. And so then underlying that, there has to be some trust almost already built in with the leadership team, because then otherwise, why would I want to participate with somebody I don't trust to begin with? So
Yeah.
it kind of like, which one comes first, but you comes first as a leader. And then that way, when you roll out the change, the trust is there so that you can get more buy-in from the other key stakeholders and then further down from the rest of the folks. But you're involving everybody in the conversation to get feedback and get that buy-in sooner and saying, hey, what do you think about this? This is what we're thinking, or love your thoughts about that. And then when they see that actually applied and implemented, that's huge, because now, I feel, like I said earlier, respected, because you're implementing something that I contributed to, and I see that. And so therefore I want to stick around because of that.
Yeah. Man, what we're talking about here, Cesar, is so like, well, we're talking about models, so it's conceptual in a way, but it also sounds like such big projects in scope. I guess it depending on what kind of change you're trying to put through.
Exactly.
But I mean, this must be an incredible amount of work and planning to be able to handhold a company or an organization through this kind of journey.
Yeah.
Do you have an example kind of you know, a, you don't have to use names, but a group that you came in, you brought this change, and I mean, they had a very successful outcome, or, kind of what the before and after might look like?
Sure. And of course, some of the before and after, sometimes people will come and say, well, we already started this. And and
Ah,
you know what I mean? It becomes a lot harder to do
stuck.
that,
Yeah.
to fix something that's already halfway through. I mean, you have to start over, and you know how it is with people. A lot of folks will say, oh my gosh, we're going through this again. We're going through another change. This is like the third one this year or second one this year. And I have to do that in addition to what I'm doing on a regular basis with my day job. And so this is the challenge with all this, but yeah, I mean, I think one of the projects, and one of the bigger projects tend to be, like I mentioned, ERP or CRM technologies that get changed. Now it's AI. There's a lot of distrust because people feel their fear for their jobs, depending what it is, right? Understandably so. Any change, people are going to be fearing their jobs. It's going on in the back of their mind, right? And so that's where this authenticity comes in. One of the projects I worked on was for implementing a new CRM, choosing between Dynamics and Salesforce, and honestly, I think what we did the stakeholder analysis and survey, and what we found is that more people were already comfortable with the Microsoft environment.
Yeah.
Was it the best solution, the most powerful solution they can have? Well, some people would argue that Salesforce is the best, CRM in the cloud solution that there is. Um, I think they're both good, but it's only as good as what people are going to use. And since we found out that they were already comfortable using certain aspects of Microsoft, then we figured it would be much less of a challenge, and leap to use the 365 and implement the dynamic 365. So that's what we focused on implementing, and the change was about that. And so 6 to 12 months it was implemented, and certainly it's being used by the sales teams, 5 divisions. And so that was the outcome, because sometimes you have to make a decision based on, okay, given what's already there, aside from what you think is the best solution, you also have to factor in, where are the people in this,
Yeah.
and how are they feeling about this change. And like I said, it was going to be too big of a leap to go into this new technology versus something they were somewhat already used to. So that's one of the biggest lessons that I learned from that. It's not necessarily about
Yeah.
the best technology available.
Right.
It's about the best technology available given what people are going to use. Otherwise, it becomes a giant paperweight, expensive giant paperweight that people aren't using. And they're wondering why, oh, we only have a 30% adoption rate, 40%
Well,
adoption rate.
we have a ton of speaker friends, and I mean, a couple of speaker associations, and CRMs are always a thing that speakers are trying to implement, but then they get their assistant to figure it out, and then
Yeah.
their assistant leaves, they're, dead in the water, right? So like those tools are only as good as how much you use them.
Right.
And, and sometimes, yeah, you're just using a certain percentage, but won't matter if it's on a basic, on that basic side of things, like you're saying. So it's an interesting take, because immediately I would go like straight to the what's got the best bells and whistles and the most everything. But if people
But
don't
that's
use,
the logical assumption, and
yeah,
you
yeah,
want to
yeah,
get what you're paid for, what you're paying
yeah,
for, and all those things. But then most people aren't asking, or they're not doing what I call the change readiness assessment. So
right,
I actually have a change readiness assessment, which is another assessment we have to
yeah,
take a look at to see where are we in all this. And by the way, I haven't mentioned this to you, that I'm developing a course, and
right,
it's on my APEE model, which is the strategic planning and messaging for change management. And it's for tech leaders and SMEs. And it's a course on my APEE model, right? My analyze and assess, plan, execute, evaluate, and exit. And so once you follow that, and mind you, there are change models out there, like, ADKAR from ProSci, there's the Cotter 8-step method, there's the McKinsey 7S, and I've used those. But I'm talking about before you even implement any kind of a change model, you got to do some strategic planning before that to make sure in the change readiness assessment and all those things, so that you're on the right track and it doesn't get derailed. And so I'm putting a course together, like a 5-module course, 5 hours is what I'm
nice.
thinking, and here to have it ready here in the next month or so. And I'm actually working on a landing page as we speak
Oh,
to start a waiting list for it. So maybe I
great.
can have you as the first person on the waiting list.
Yeah, for sure. Sign me up. I'll check it out. And speaking of signing up and checking out, what, if you're looking, what kind of companies work with you, I guess, size or industry and everything, Cesar, and then where can people reach out to you?
Best place is LinkedIn, Cesar Viana Teague, just go ahead and message me there. That's probably the easiest way. And I work with, tech companies predominantly, anywhere from, 15 people to 1,500 people, usually somewhere around there. Um, but yeah, I've done work with bigger companies you've heard of, like Adobe, and I did some work with Silicon Valley Bank like 5 years ago before they ran into some trouble, and then came back from the ashes. Well, that was a whole crazy story. But anyway, it's change is change. Everybody has to change. The
Yeah.
example I gave earlier on the Dynamics one, that's a company with about 65 people, and so. Right, but predominantly used by the sales team initially, and then from there. But
Yeah.
yeah, so those are the folks I work with, mostly in North America, although certainly open to international things. I'm multicultural myself, so I'm certainly open to international assignments as needed.
Excellent. Well, very good. It's change management. There's always going to be change. You're never going to go out of business, Caesar. Like that's it's a pretty what do you call it? Recession proof, I think. I don't know. Maybe not. We'll see. Thank you so much for being on. Oh, you wanted to say one other thing? Go ahead.
No, I mean it really is. I mean, it's just that the whole
Yeah.
what is it? The change is the only thing that's going to be constant.
Yeah. Exactly.
But there are, again, it comes back to, at what point as a leader do you embrace that,
Right.
and sit up and take notice of, okay, it's coming, or we want to create this. How are we going to go about doing that effectively? And
Yeah.
that's where the strategic planning and the APE model comes in to help with that.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, thank you for sharing your perspective, your expertise with us here on the show.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you to all our listeners for tuning in once again. And until next time, you know what to do. Stay engaged.
Thank you so much for listening to Engaging Personalities. If you believe this world needs more engagement and you're an industry leader or you have an interesting take on rehumanizing business, go to go.engagify.ai/podcast-guest to apply and come on the show. If you got something out of this interview, do you mind sharing it on your social media? Just grab a quick screenshot with your phone and text it to a friend or post it on the socials. If you know someone that would be a great guest, tag them on social media to let them know about the show. Include the hashtag Engaging Personalities. I love seeing your posts and guest suggestions. We are regularly putting out new episodes and content. To make sure you don't miss any episode, go ahead and subscribe. Your thumbs up, ratings, and reviews go a long way to help promote the show and mean a lot to me and my team. Want to know more? Go to our website, engageify.ai, or follow me on LinkedIn. Thanks for listening, and stay engaged.